Hi Guy, welcome to the second episode of the AMIGArama podcast. Before we jump right into it, I thought we'd have a look at more recent news. Now, obviously with the Amiga being such an old system, we don't really get very many new bits of hardware, new games, stuff like that. So, as and when I find out about this stuff, it won't always be 100% on the ball because I'm just one person. I will report back on the podcast, have a bit of a chat about it and see what's happened in the world of the Amiga. But a couple of things that really caught my eye recently was a title known as Wasted Dreams, which was, I believe was originally an Amiga CD game, which had, it's like an isometric action game, adventure where you're like watching your chat walk around, interacting with the world, you know, shooting at stuff, having the adventure. But the difference about this one is that the entire game is fully voiced, but the incredible part is it's voiced by one person, and the voice is for the 90s, your typical terrible, over the top, pretty deadpan at times. It's a rather poor version of what you would expect for someone doing the voice on a game, but it's worth listening to for that alone. Anyway, somebody over on the EAB, which is the English Amiga board, has managed to convert it into a hard drive edition, and that's also available as I'm looking at it now, a WHD load edition, so it can be fully installed and played as if, you know, it was a full-on original game. I will stick a link into the episode notes. I do actually have a website now for the podcast. It's just AMIGArama.com. Every episode, as we pick stuff out, I will post links up there, so have a look at each episode. I mean, as well as listening to this on iTunes and the typical places, you'll be able to play it back, because I'll upload each episode onto the actual website, so it'll all work very nicely. So yeah, that was Wasted Dreams as a first one. The next bit of news was a title called Crazy Priest. Now, when I first saw this one, I wasn't sure what to make of it, because it looks very similar to Gauntlet, with at the same time that sort of graphical look that you get with the likes of, like, say, Bomberman. And you're running around, you're collecting jewels, shooting at enemies and stuff like that, and it's like a weird little action puzzler. But I mean, I was having a quick go at it, and I was having to play this one through an emulator because it needs an absolute beast of an Amiga to play compared to what I've got. I think it's about, I'll look at the minimum requirements, at least 2 megs of RAM and it's got to be an Amiga Classic with a 68020 processor. I don't think that'll work with a 500. I did play it on an emulator. I had a bit of a blast with it. I mean, the couple of guys have worked on this for over 2 years. Just recently completed it. It's available now. I will stick a link into the show notes. If you want to just wander over there, the website is called gryretro.com, and then there's a section in there called New Amiga Games. Worth a download. I think there's about 16 to 17 levels to play through, and it has 2-player games on it as well. It's a brand new title. It's a new Amiga game. Go support it. Now, for this week's episode, I wanted to pick a game that appealed to me personally, you know, something that really got my interest going back in the day when I had a classic Amiga and everything. And one of the first titles that always comes to mind is one of the first demo discs, if you like, which I was really obsessed with. You know, I needed to, this was back when if I wanted the latest and greatest, it wasn't always easy to get. Even with my ability to get copy games, I couldn't get 100% of everything. And Jetstrike was always up there. I think it was Amiga Action or possibly Amiga Power, one of the big mags with a free demo disc on the front, and it was on like a few flying missions. And basically it hooked me straight away because I could see there was a really promising game, and as I don't know what you really call it. It's like an action dogfighting tactical warfare style game. There was nothing really quite like it. I mean, looks wise, titles at the time, probably the closest thing it looked to was, and this is by no means a gameplay comparison, but, Top Gun on the NES, which is a truly terrible game, but that side-on view of taking off and flying and, you know, being able to spin and loop the loop and have combat and stuff. And it was that sort of a game, but, for an Amiga title, it was always one of my favourites, always something I went back to. I mean, just having a quick look at the story, I've got a few lines of it scribbled down here in the notes, but it starts, "The last you heard from 009 was just after he had infiltrated a meeting of SPUD, which stands for Society of Particularly Undesirable Dastardly Dudes, which is a secret organisation made up of arms dealers, mad dictators, psychopaths, and traffic wardens." You know, straight away there, this is what the humour's like throughout the entire game. The coded message that 009 sent went along the lines of, "SPUD, planning to take over the entire world. Let's do lunch. Cheers, 009. Unfortunately, when you arrived at Shea Bond, oh God, for your lunch and secret agents meeting, you found 009 slumped over the menu with a knife in his back. To cap it all, the steak was undercooked." Yeah, very silly bit of humour there, but the rest of the story pretty much, it's all gibberish. It's ridiculous, and it's all along them lines, and the missions tie into that sort of a humour. Now, the game itself, I think it was published by Rasputin, and that would have been in 1994, but was developed by Shadow Software. Now, looking into them as a company, I mean, it was just a name for a couple of guys, really, a couple of brothers, chaps called Aaron and Adam Fothergill. I think I pronounced that right. And, they got together. They were big play nuts at the time. They really wanted to do like a side-on combat game. I think they'd have similar things practicing coding from before, and this was their first attempt at like a commercial product, I believe, and I think it worked out really, really well. I mean, for what they came up with, I mean, just looking at my notes, this was voted the 28th best game of all time on for the CD32 version, which was in 1996. Now, there was a version for every single Amiga, so, like 500 and 600, which come with, I think it was about 40 planes included on a couple of discs. Whereas the A1200 and the CD32 editions, they had 60 planes each. So there was a bit of a difference. And you might think, well, it's only like 40 to 60 planes. It doesn't sound like a lot. But when you start looking into like what these guys had done, they had actually gone through every single plane and like hand-drawn sprite art for all like the loops and the combat and every single movement throughout the world. And they've even commented in various interviews about just the amount of time and effort and just how far they had to go just to get that much level of detail in the game. I mean, at the time, one of the things that always stood out to me, because I used to get like one of these magazines where you'd pay about, I think it was a couple of £1 a week, and it'd be like a cover a set subject, and there'd be something attached to the cover. Like maybe after a while you'd be like building a dinosaur or a toy plane or a car or something, and all that air-affixed tiles, super gluing models together and, hanging them off the roof. Yes, I did do some of that to some degree. I was quite sad. It's not something I've actually got the skill to do anymore, I'm afraid. It's a long time ago, but this is back during the days of the mid-90s and stuff, and all that glorified war stuff that was going on and all over the top. And I think this is the time of like the stealth fighter, and one of the great things about this as a game is just the amount of vehicles that they cover. You've got everything from like World War II planes going back decades, hang gliders, F-15, which was, I think, one of the main combat, it was like the most modern advantage plane at the time. But I'm trying to think back now. I think there was a MiG-29, the stealth fighter, as I said before, a couple of helicopters, I'm trying. There was even a dragon in there, which you could actually like go swooping through the sky, blowing fire at enemies and stuff like that. It was very, very inventive for, it sounds like the limited, but when you actually play the game, there's an incredible number of vehicles to use. It works in a funny way as well, because like every single mission you can do, you can select like a plane to do, but you're only given a set amount for a full playthrough of the game. So if you wanted to on the first mission, you could select the most like souped up amazing plane possible, and you'll have like 3 or 4 of them available throughout the entire game. So if you use them in the first couple of missions acting like an idiot, even though you might need them later on in the game, once they're gone, you know, once you've blown them up, you've wrecked them, you're out of luck. You're completely out of luck. So it has a very interesting way. It's sort of like inventory management of building the game. Yeah. So, I mean, going back to it as a game, it sounds very action orientated. The fact that it's into dogfighting and, you know, circling planes and recon style missions and dropping people off and taking, pictures of sites and other airplanes, you know, spying, that sort of things. But for what it is and the level of control that you've got, it's actually quite complex and complicated. I mean, it used similar sort of controls, you know, like pressing down swoops the plane up and then up. You know, you can mess around as well with the keys if you don't like that sort of thing. But back in the day, I used to play this with, an actual joystick, and I found it too difficult at the time. I really just could not get on with it. And at the moment, you know, because I've got a new system, I actually picked up ages ago, like an adapter, which converts, I got like a PS2 controller, which I can use with any like 8 or 16-bit 9-pin joystick adapter. It's a really, really nifty adapter. I've had this thing for years. I think you can still buy them on eBay to this day, but well worth picking up. I mean, the PS2 controller is just one of my favourites, but the great thing about that is being able to go back to Amiga title. I can use the sticks, I can use like the D-pad sort of thing, and you can use that across different games, and you can even program buttons, I think, as well. I might be wrong a bit on that. My memory's a bit hazy, but the Amiga's only a one-button system, one fire button system anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But using that controller on this game just gives you such an extra level of control. It's really hard to describe. I mean, it's quite difficult. I mean, I used to play it religiously on the keyboard back in the day because it was the only way I could get the exact amount of up and down to move through stuff and swoop and so. I mean, joysticks were just too difficult, but just spending 5 minutes with it straight away, and the pad is so comfortable. It really does add like an extra level to it. Now, there's a few other things. I just had a look up some Easter eggs for the game as well. One which made me quite laugh, which I read in an interview. But apparently there's actually an Easter egg hidden in the game, which is a UFO. Now, apparently there's only a 1 in a million chance of this ever appearing across any game, any person playing the game, but it did actually get reported on. I think it was Amiga Power. But basically what happens is that a UFO will come down and crash into you. And then to apologize, it gives you up a souped up super plane, which is like one of the best planes in the game. And it's really, really amazing. But the thing is, this is almost impossible to get, and they just threw it in as a joke, and they even said that, you know, the idea behind it is that maybe one person might find it be a neat little trick for someone out there, and they were surprised at just how quickly someone eventually found it. I mean, I can't say I've got it, but it might be something to go and look on YouTube. Now there is various versions of the game. I said, like, no, there's the 500, the 1200 and CD32. Now the CD32 is probably the best version by far. I mean, in particular, it does, because it's CD and it's got music on it. They've done like a joke rendition of Top Gun's DangerZone theme. I'm sure I'm not humming or singing that into the mic. I'm sure you all know it, but they did a joke song called Fast Jet Fever, and it's worth just tracking down on YouTube and just having a listen, because it's really entertaining. It's actually quite funny, and it just takes the mickey out of that song and so on. But, you know, it's for the time, I suppose, it was just the mid-90s, and this sort of humour was quite prevalent in a lot of games, and it just added to the atmosphere of the title. It was a real joy to play. Now, one of the great things about this, when I'm playing the A500 version, it's only on 2 discs. And even though I'm running it off the Gotek, the thing is the Gotek load speed it just runs as if it's a normal floppy disk drive. It's not super fast, or even though it's running off a USB stick, it doesn't mean you're actually getting like USB type speeds. But even with 2 discs, and you know, you have to flip between the 2. The load times were incredibly short. You're not sat there for like 5-10 minutes waiting for it to go on between games. You don't have lots and lots of disc swaps or anything like that, which was, quite impressed me, especially with some of the missions and so on. And it doesn't have you swapping the discs constantly, but, which is always a big plus. But, I mean, as you can probably tell already, as a game, I absolutely love this. It was a joy to play when I was a kid. I was absolutely addicted to it. The timing of it was just right, and I think it holds up incredibly well today. It's still worth going back to. That British sense of humour is still there. It's a good laugh. It's funny. You've got so many things to play with, so many different types of missions. I say just some of the simple stuff like just being able to eject from the plane, which is a great laugh, because you can be flying over something, you've run out of weapons like bombs and machine guns, you aim your plane at something and you just do like a kamikaze mission and just eject out of the top and then crash your plane in. Yes, you'll lose alive or something, but you know, at the same time you can have success on the mission. And add to this as well, it ties in as some missions can only be completed if you do like really, really difficult things like flying between balloons, collecting someone, saving someone, but then you've got to fly all the way back, avoiding enemy fire and stuff, and then you've got to land the plane. But it works really, really well. The controls are great. It can be quite difficult to like land and control the plane delicately enough, but once you've got it, there is a level of skill to it. I mean, the whole game has this, it's a very good but difficult learning curve. When you start off on the first few missions, they're quite easy, you know, there's not much to them. It's just to get you used to controls and just see how it goes. And, you know, it really does ease you in for about 4 or 5 missions. And then the difficulty really starts to ramp up. And by about the 5th or 6th mission after this point, it gets extremely difficult. And practically the only way you're going to get past it at this point is if you practice and play it properly. You really need to put some effort in and have some proper skill. And I'm not saying that to put people off, because people think, oh, it's just too difficult. No, you just need to have a bit of skill at the game. You need to be able to play it properly to get past that point. And the great thing is, once you've achieved it, you don't lose that skill. You've still got it. And then you take it on to the next missions, and the missions get more complicated and more complex and more difficult. And it's a rather neat package. And it just, the way it eases you into that and then ups it. It's a nice curve to it. And it always impressed me. I mean, again, it was a really fun game. I was really hooked on it back in the day. Probably one of my favourite parts about it was the dogfighting aspect, because just being able to go and like lock your weapons onto the other enemies, being able to loop the loop and chase after them. You could go in like anything from modern day planes to, well, they're not that's it, they're 20 years old now. They were modded at the time. But you have all these really neat planes to play from, like World War II type planes to modern day, and you could go out there and do proper fighting combat, and you would have to plan your missions and really put some effort into it. And there was some really fantastic stuff just shoved in there. I mean, it's not perfect by all means. Probably at the time, it's probably about an 80-85% type of review. I would put it a bit higher than that, because I still do get a lot of fun out of it, because it's, whenever I get an Amiga, or whatever system it is, I always play a copy of this first. I just cannot help it. But it does have its faults. I mean, the first thing I had with it, and because I've not played it in years, and when I loaded it up to just start having a go again and make me familiarise myself with how it all plays, the main menu is terrible. I think it's probably the time, there wasn't really that people do like the whole human interface stuff to do with games and programs wasn't really all that good back then. They didn't really develop stuff like people weren't like paving the way or doing certain things the way they should be done. So it was all very, it was all just higgledy-piggledy and thrown in there. What a terrible word, but the main menu system is really, really complicated. I mean, when you go to it, you've got lots and lots and lots of different buttons, and you've got different training mission buttons. So you've got things like the recon, the camera, night mode, bombing mode, spy drop, and then there's something called there's a practice mode, which is self-explanatory. Then you've got like a Aero Olympics, which, I think that's it. I think it's 9 or 10 missions, which are all on a timer based, and you've got to, it's like multiplayer, but it can be against a computer, but you have to score. Sorry, no, it isn't against a computer, and you have to outscore your opponent, and the highest score wins. It's a nice, neat, extra little feature, but one thing that really annoyed me when you go to it, when you go to to start the main button, in order to, the start of the main game, you would think, well, there must be something there like mission begin or mission start. There isn't. There's just a button called combat. And looking at it in the mix of all these like training modes and different modes, and it's not like, it's just slap bang in there, and you just look at it and you just think, well, it must just be like a fighting mode. But no, it isn't. If you click that, it starts the main game and you get all the missions one after the other. And it's a very odd choice, and I don't know why they didn't break that down a bit more or make it more simplified and something like that. It just really doesn't do the game well or do it any favors. But anyway, that's probably to say that's a problem compared to the rest of the game. That's a very, very a little issue. I mean, as it goes on, it does get incredibly difficult towards the end. But the great thing is, if you mess up, you have messed up. It's very, very rarely the game's fault. It's all down to your own skill level and the amount of time and effort you put into it. But it's certainly worth going back to, guys. I mean, if you can get a copy of this, it'll work on any Amiga. I mean, I would highly, highly recommend that you do, because it's very addictive. There's a hell of a lot of content in there. But if you can, I would say go for the A1200 or the CD32 edition. Now, I don't have an A1200. That's still on my wish list, and I'm determined I'm going to get one eventually. I'm going to start saving up, I promise. I'll need it because I want to cover the AGA titles eventually for the podcast. But just the fact that, one of my all-time favourite games has also got an extra version on the A12. It's just perfect. You couldn't ask for more. So yeah, highly recommended. That was just a bit of a brief look, I think. I hope I've not bored you too much there. This is what the episodes are going to be like each week. I'll go into a game in depth, go back over it, maybe talk about it from my own perspective, of course, and a bit of my history where possible, even if it's a bit of a review or go into the history of the game. And I'm going to try and pick the games and to have something to actually talk about, to discuss around, not just say, oh, this is game A, it's good, it's bad, these are its, I don't want to go into it like that. We want to have something we can have a bit of a discussion around. Now, if you like this, by all means, please review it or give it 5 stars, or I know it's only the second episode, but please don't give it 1 star on iTunes. It really will help, because especially as I'm trying to just get started with these Amiga episodes, and the more people that see it, the more reason it'll give for me to keep pushing on and doing more. Now, by all means, please come to the AMIGArama.com website. It's only just beginning, but I will start putting up more and more content, and I'm hoping to grow that over time. There is a Facebook page. Just search AMIGArama on Facebook. It should pop up. I will, of course, respond to comments, but one thing I would like to ask people to do is maybe start recommending some games. Something you think you would like me to cover, or even if you just want to ask questions about games you have good experience with, or you think will make a good episode to go into. And, maybe I'll build a list and we'll take it from there. As always, guys, thanks for listening, and please look out for more episodes in future.